Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is Elena and here I talk about books. I'm sounding kind of raspy today for whatever reason, but we're just going to roll with it. Today I'm really excited to talk about book recommendations for different genres and subgenres. I'm going to do one for each and I believe I have 21 total, so bear with me. Maybe you're here because you're a mood reader and you have a very specific craving for a book, but you're just not sure which one to read. I'm going to go into the different genres and subgenres and hopefully this will help you out. Maybe you have genre fatigue. I find that if I read too many of the same type of book over and over again, it starts to feel repetitive and then I just don't enjoy reading anymore. That's the main reason why I change genres so much and always try to do something different. Maybe you're here because you just really want to try something new and leave your comfort zone, but you don't know where to start. There's so many books out there and I feel like it's so hard to narrow it down, especially when you're not too familiar with the subgenres. For example, maybe you're not a fantasy reader and you think fantasy is just Harry Potter. There are so many different types of fantasy books, and I'll go through some of the main subgenres, but you might end up finding something that you really like. Just because you don't like one type of subgenre doesn't mean you have to axe the entire genre. We're going to jump right in. We're going to start with fantasy. Fantasy is a really intimidating genre, that's why I want to get it out of the way first. I think people worry that fantasy is going to be really intense world building, and that's certainly the case for high fantasy. You can really ease into fantasy. And if you're worried about the intense world building, just avoid anything that's high fantasy. I'm going to start with a classic fantasy recommendation, and it's actually from the 50s, but it is the Chronicles of Narnia. So the Chronicles of Narnia actually has 7 different books inside. This is my original copy from when I read this as a kid. It is well loved, and it still has my original bookmark in it. It's from the Scholastics Book Fair, and it says belongs to Elena. I got my mom to bring me this from her house because I really wanted it to be part of my own library at home. I think the book that everyone's familiar with from this series is The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. That's obviously a great book, but that's the second book in the series. You can start right from the beginning or you can go right into Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. It's up to you. It's a great book to start fantasy with, and it's super kid and teen friendly as well. Next, we're going to go into a little bit of YA fantasy or YA romantasy. So let's break that down. YA is young adult. That doesn't mean that grown-ups won't enjoy it. It just might have younger characters and closed-door spice or no spice at all. Closed-door spice is when we know that something happened between the characters, but we don't get any details about it. It might look like they're having a great evening together and a passionate night, and then they wake up the next morning. I digress. YA romantasy, the Crimson Moth series. So these are the 2 books. Heartless Hunter is the first book, and Rebel Witch is the second book. This is about a witch and a witch hunter. I found that it was a really unique kind of magic system. I really love reading about witches. It definitely has an enemies to lovers trope, but like I said, it's closed door spice and the magic is really cool and it's a really enjoyable read. Book 2 is even better than the first, in my opinion. Something to note with fantasy specifically is that it often is part of a series. That's not necessarily a bad thing because if you really enjoy a book, it's great that there are more in the series. The bad thing about a series is that sometimes the first book will end in a cliffhanger. I always hate when that happens, especially if the second book is not out. And I really think there should be a trigger warning for this in the beginning of a book, because usually if it does have a cliffhanger ending, I'd rather not read it. Or I would rather wait until all books in the series are out before reading it. There are some series that don't have a cliffhanger ending or that are interconnected standalone. So those ones are easier to read because you get the full story and then you get another story on top of it. Next, we're going to do romantasy, but this one's romantasy for adults. So we have The Serpent and the Wings of the Night. This has vampires and it has trials. It also has enemies to lovers. This is a 2-book series, but there are 2 other books that are about different characters in the same world. You can get away with just reading this book and the next book, and then you'll be done with the story. Okay, we have 2 more fantasy recommendations. The next one we have is historical fantasy. Upon a Starlit Tide is like a dark retelling of Little Mermaid, and it has some elements of other fairy tales as well. I went into this book thinking it was just going to be fantasy because there's a mermaid at the front, but now after having read it, I would categorize it more as historical fantasy because it does have a very strong historical element to it. It's set in France in the 1700s, and a lot of the historical elements are accurate. It's a cool read, it has action, it has a romantic subplot, it's really interesting, and it's a fun read. I know this probably didn't need its own category, but really wanted to include it, so I would categorize this next book as funny romantasy. This is a book that's like, if you want to read something that is fantasy and that has not a lot of spice, I would say it's a lot more tension than spice. It's a little bit on the darker side, but it is laugh out loud funny. That's Blood of Hercules. I wouldn't say that it has a cliffhanger ending, but it definitely leaves a lot of room for book 2, which is coming out in fall 2025. This book is about a girl who's really poor, but then she accidentally finds out that she's actually a god. So now she's flung into this world of gods where she has to go through these trials and go to this special school. The love story in here is a little bit taboo, but I actually could not put this down. I inhaled this book in one day. Some people don't like the kind of more modern language in this book, but I thought it was more relatable and funny. Don't know how well it's going to age, but for right now, great book. We're going to change direction now. We're done with fantasy for now, and we're going to go into nonfiction. Nonfiction is a really intimidating genre for me personally, because I like to read books as a distraction. I want to get lost in them. However, I have read a few nonfiction books that I really love. The first one, which is just regular nonfiction, is Everything is Tuberculosis. So this one has a kind of scientific element to it. It's really about how the history of tuberculosis has shaped who we are now. It's a quick and captivating read. For autobiography, we have Dinner with Vampires. Bethany Joy Lenz, the author, she was on a cult TV show, One Tree Hill, while also being part of an actual cult. In this book, she talks about how she ended up in this cult, and it's a really crazy and interesting story. I would highly recommend this book. I think it really shows how we don't really know what people are going through, but also abuse and manipulation sometimes takes years and happens so slowly and seamlessly that we don't even realize it's happening in the moment. I think it's easy to say, oh, I would never be tricked into joining a cult. But this book really gives you a different perspective on how it works. Self-Help, Atomic Habits. I think this is a great book to read if you want to build good habits or get rid of bad ones. It's super informative. There are a lot of useful practical tips for you to try in your day-to-day life. Lastly, in the nonfiction category, we have Memoir. For Memoir, I would highly recommend Educated. Not only is this book beautifully written, it's such a gripping story, and it's one of my all-time favorite reads. The book is about a girl who grew up in a survivalist home. Her family didn't believe in going to the doctor, getting an education, and she was so isolated from mainstream society. Then at 17 years old, she decides that she wants to educate herself, and she starts learning everything from scratch. I highly recommend this read. We're going to go into the romance genre next, and this one also has a lot of subgenres. We've already talked about different levels of spice, so I'm going to be recommending books with spice and without spice. If you're just easing into the romance genre and you want to start with something not spicy, I would highly recommend Abby Jimenez, and specifically Part of Your World. This is the first book in a series, but you don't need to read all the books. You can just read them as standalones. They're slightly interconnected. It's about an ER doctor who falls in love with a carpenter that's 10 years younger than her. They don't live in the same town. They have completely different lives. It's about how they work through that together. Paranormal romance is the next subgenre. This is kind of niche, but it's essentially romance with some paranormal elements. So there could be ghosts, there could be some other type of magic, split timelines, that sort of thing. Dead Romantics is about a girl who can see ghosts, and she goes back to her hometown when her dad passes away. But there she runs into a familiar person and figures out the way forward from there. I love Ashley Poston's writing, but this is probably my favorite one of her books and my top recommendation for a paranormal romance. Okay, my next recommendation is a book that had me crying, and that's P.S. I Hate You. This is about a girl who loses her brother, and his dying wish is that she essentially go on a scavenger hunt across the country with his best friend. The problem is she used to be in love with his best friend. I love the forced proximity in this book, but it also heavily deals with grief. Both characters have lost someone really important to them, but they also find each other through their grief process. It's not super insanely spicy, it's not all smut, but it has some very spicy scenes in it. We're going to take a darker turn here and go for taboo romance. This was my very first spicy book, and still one of my favorite spicy books. Credence by Penelope Douglas. This is about a girl who is not yet 18, so when she's orphaned, she still needs a guardian. Oh, this is already sounding bad. So she ends up going to her step-uncle's house essentially in the mountains. She's never met him before. They're not blood related. And he has 2 sons that are closer to her age. In one part of the book, they get snowed into the house, which is expected for the area in that time of year. But this book is good. This is a taboo romance that I would reread. And last but certainly not least, we have dark romance. You're going to see a lot of dark romance recommendations, and I feel like the top one is Haunting Adeline. That's not the one that I would recommend because I think it's a bit of a rough start and there's a lot of stuff in there that people don't like. Before you read any dark romance, you need to really think about your view on consent and how you would like to see that portrayed in books. A lot of dark romance has consensual non-consent, which means the character says she doesn't want it, but you know that she does. If you hate that, then don't read dark romance. My go-to dark romance recommendation would be Does It Hurt by the same author as Haunting Adeline. This is like a dark romance thriller. It's an insane read. It starts off with a girl hooking up with a guy, trying to steal his identity. He finds out, confronts her, and they end up stranded on an island. On that island, there lives an old man in an abandoned lighthouse, and just a lot of creepy stuff happens. It's kind of like a romance thriller crossover, and it's definitely very dark. Next, we're going to finish off with the fiction genre. There are obviously lots of subgenres under the fiction umbrella. First, we're going to talk about mystery. Wild Dark Shore is a really great mystery read. The book is set on an island that's being evacuated because it's essentially going under. The only people left on this island are the island caretaker and his 3 kids. One day, a woman washes up on the shore of this island and she has to stay with them because there's currently no way off the island. It's how they work together to care for the island, how they learn about each other, and uncover each other's secrets along the way. Really captivating read, beautifully written. Kind of similar to mystery, we have murder mystery, specifically a whodunit. If you've watched Glass Onion, that's what this book reminds me of. So it's a locked room murder mystery whodunit, Party of Liars. This one is set at a lavish Sweet 16 party in a giant house that's rumored to be haunted. Throughout the book, you learn about all the different characters and you only find out who died at the end. My issue with this type of genre usually is that if I predict the ending and I'm right, then I find I don't enjoy the book as much. I didn't predict anything that was going to happen in this book, and I thought it was really good. So I would definitely recommend this if you specifically want a locked room whodunit type murder mystery. Next, we're going to go thriller. I'm very picky with thrillers because I feel like they're so formulaic and they really always feel the same. Great thriller for you to read if you haven't already is Rock, Paper, Scissors by Alice Feeney. It's about a couple that wins this weekend getaway in a secluded area in the winter and kind of goes into their history and their marriage. It's best to go into this one blind and not know too much about what happens so that you can fully enjoy the story. Sci-fi. And I will always recommend this as my top sci-fi read ever. Dissolution by Nicholas Binge. I don't know why this book is not more popular. It's so good. This book is about an old woman whose husband is living in a care facility because he has dementia and he's losing his memories. One day, a strange man comes to this woman's house and says, I don't think your husband is losing his memories. I think they're being erased, and I want you to help me get them back. It's a unique narrating perspective, an original story, and it really does a deep dive into memory and the role that memory plays in our lives. One of my top reads of 2025, hands down. If you want to try out historical fiction that's not fantasy like my previous recommendation, you should read The Women. This book, aside from being beautifully written, offers a really interesting perspective on the Vietnam War and the role that women played in it. It's a heavy read, so if trauma or PTSD are triggers for you, it's not for you. But if you're okay with that, it is a really, really great intro to historical fiction. For general fiction, we have The Favorites. This book is full of drama. It's about the life of a competitive figure skater, the brutal climb to be the best, and all the betrayals along the way. This is the most dramatic thing I have ever read. Next, we have magical realism. So what is magical realism? It's our regular world, but something unusual or magical happens in it, and it's part of the story. My absolute favorite magical realism book is Other Side of Now. It's about a girl who accidentally ends up in an alternate timeline of her own life, where one major decision shaped the way that her future unfolded. In this alternate timeline, her best friend, who she had lost many years ago, is still alive. It's not a long read, and there are a lot of really great themes in it. Ambition, self-fulfillment, friendship, love. It does have a romantic subplot. It has a little bit of spice, but it's just a beautifully written, feel-good kind of book. We're going to wrap this up with horror. Before I started reading horror, I really thought that it was just Stephen King. I read a little bit of Stephen King, but it didn't make me fall in love with the genre. What made me fall in love with the genre was When the Wolf Comes Home. I could absolutely never watch a horror movie. I'm the kind of person that would rather just read the summary of a horror movie instead of watching it because I want to know what happens, but I don't want the jump scares. I also wouldn't say that I love being scared or anything like that. But the great thing about the horror genre is that it really pulls you in, gets your blood pumping. I love really emotionally connecting or reacting to a book. When the Wolf Comes Home is about a little boy who runs away from home because he's scared of his dad. The main character is a failing actress. She works at a diner, she's coming home and she finds this boy, and they go on the run together from the dad. There's a lot of gory violence in this book. It's so creative, it's so well written. If you're new to the horror genre and you want to test it out, this is where you start. If you give any of these a try, I would love to hear your thoughts on it. I love mixing up genres and finding what I like. Alternating genres with each book also helps me continue enjoying reading, not get bored, not get genre fatigue. I guess it just helps me feel all the feelings across different types of books. If there are any genres that I haven't mentioned here that maybe you have a recommendation for, drop it in the comments. Make sure to like and subscribe. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you again soon.